My name's Dr. Sophia Yin. I'm a veterinarian and applied animal behaviorist, and I live in Davis, California. I became interested in behavior when I had a problem dog, another boxer. His name was Max. And his issue was that whenever we wanted to do something or somebody wanted to make him do something that he didn't want to do, he would become aggressive. I took him to dog training class, and he actually got worse. We used choke chain corrections, pinch collar. They said hit him with a stick on the nose, have him push him down onto his side, roll him on his back, hang him up until he passed out. And I was a good student. I was probably the best student in all of the classes. I did exactly what they said. But at the same time, he was doing all these things that made me angry, and I was told, he's trying to be the boss, you need to boss him. So it was a relationship of conflict. Then I finally found some trainers who could help. They were obedience competition trainers, very high-level trainers. Everybody who were their students would go to national championships. Spring. So they would show the animal what they wanted, and they'd reward these little steps. So if the animal behaved well, they got a reward, and then they'd gradually make the behaviors more complex. However, because I had messed him up earlier, and because we were still using corrections when we thought the dog should know what he was supposed to do, he was never the dog I could have had. So oh, I gotta stop.
In America, we are raised that this is a democracy, right? And we all have equal rights. We all treat each other, hopefully, kindly and compassionately. And we have freedom. And even in a family situation, even though the parents are, sort of the leaders, right? The mom and the dad, still, they rule kindly and they rule compassionately. And they're not, hopefully, they're not, just sort of these despots, right? But then when it comes to dogs, all of a sudden, a lot of people have this idea that the dog needs to be under my thumb, and the dog is somehow lesser than. And I'm not saying that the dog should be, more important than your child, obviously, but this is a family member. This is not a thing. And I don't really know where that sort of mentality comes from.
I told you never to bring a dog into this house. Get that mutt out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here, you. You go to bed without your supper. Then maybe you'll learn to obey your father.
Public opinion about dog training is fueled to a very, very great extent by the latest TV personality. The public's view of modern-day dog training has been fueled and led tremendously by Cesar Millan and his Dog Whisperer program.
My job is to help people to understand what dogs really need.
And unfortunately, from my perspective, as a dog trainer that has come through all of the various incarnations of dog training and having come from an approach that used an approach to dog training that was heavily dominance-oriented, and having moved away from that to something that I believe is far more advantageous to both species, he has really, his television program has set back dog training by about 50 years.
This is good, this is good. This is good. This is part of it.
When I realized that Josh had bitten Cesar, I was horrified. I just felt so bad.
And that's him, all right? It's like a rattlesnake trying to strike you. Which he did strike me, but you know, it's not gonna make me back away.
In the animal world, things are cruel. And if you don't play the game, then you don't survive. And basically owning a dog, you're playing a game with the dog. That's how the dog's programmed. That's how they've been bred over centuries. And now they're more pets and they're just family items. So people run into problems treating dogs almost like people, where they're not able to lay the law down or reinforce the dog in a way that sometimes the dog truly needs.
Good boy. Good boy, yeah. Good.
I always see myself as above the dogs. And I want the dogs to see that, to see me as being above, being the alpha dog, the pack leader.
I've tried my best to show him that I'm the owner, and my wife is the owner.
That you're the alpha male.
Where his place is, but when he sees another dog, forget it.
Today, Cesar's wife, Illusion, has just arrived with reinforcements, including a helpful retriever named Benjamin.
The dogs in my pack are socialized. That's what we need Churchill to be.
In less than 2 minutes, Cesar's calm, assertive energy has eliminated Churchill's aggression.
Most dogs are bred to be followers. If you take charge of their life from the beginning and show them what to do and how to do it and do it your way and keep constraints on them, they will follow you gladly. The concept of the alpha dog is if you're the leader and the dog wakes up every morning going, he's my boss, he's my pack leader, then his life is in order. It makes it so much easier for the dog to go through his day-to-day dealings knowing that he has someone to look back on, or someone to look back to.
So the alpha dog concept was something introduced in the 40s by Schenkel, who was looking at wolf behavior in a captive setting, which is a classic ethological and psychological way to look at animal behavior. And in doing a lot of observations on captive wolf packs in zoos and other facilities, Schenkel came up with this notion that in these social groups, it's required that wolves form hierarchies. And the wolves who are going to compete to be on the top of these hierarchies are going to be the alpha wolves. And they're first to reproduce, they eat first. Other wolves are going to be submissive to them, and so they're dominant. And that's, as far as I know, its introduction, and it really caught on.
Dave Meach is the foremost wolf biologist out there. He has become more and more involved with wolf behavior. But he is also one of the people that has argued greatly against the whole concept of alpha. Part of that is based on the differences between wolves in captivity, which is what we study, and wolves in the wild. Wolves in the wild are, in essence, different animals than captive wolves, in terms of the age structure of a pack and the lifestyle of the animals. And you think about it, it becomes quite obvious. A wild wolf pack, in fact, is generally the parents and their young offspring. And young wolves defer to and submit to adult wolves, period. It's just what they do. At some point in their life, they may start dominating other individuals, but unless they're, for some reasons, kept within a pack and stay within a pack, you know, that type of relationship is not terribly stable. And of course, in the wild, the wolves are not always together. So again, you have greater instability in these relationships. Whereas a captive pack, they're always in close proximity, they're always together, and that's why you start seeing this very clearly defined linear hierarchy develop.
In captivity, you have a very unusual situation. You have a number of unrelated wolves who were either captured for display or were trouble, and so were brought into captivity. And sure enough, in that setting, they form some kind of hierarchy, and there's a lot of competition. In the wild, that's not a natural organization of wolves. Wolves tend to be organized into family packs. Your alpha pair are the breeding male and female. And certainly they are kind of in charge of the pack. They might lead a hunt, they probably eat first. But on the other hand, the other wolves in the pack are often just their youngsters and maybe another generation. If we think of it as a family, you know, that's the model of a human family comes to mind. Knowing something about wolf behavior is absolutely relevant in interpreting dog behavior. Now, there are some important caveats to that. One, a dog is not a wolf. A dog does not revert to being a wolf if let out of the house and not given anything to eat or let into the wild. Furthermore, dogs and wolves share a common ancestor, but it is probably not the contemporary wolf that we see, who was the domestic dog's ancestor. So when we look at wolf behavior, we're looking at an animal who was also evolved over the intervening maybe 15,000 years since dogs became domesticated.
Oh, look, Ope, what were dogs a million years ago? Wild animals, right? Wolves, coyotes, they know how to hunt and fish and look for shelter. You take them two big Airedales. Why, they looked as healthy as horses to me. And the little spotted one, he was in fine shape.
But the little one I first come in with, he was a trembler, wasn't he?
Him? Oh, well, the big ones will look after him. See, they take care of their own.
When I was in college, we were told that wolves evolved in what I call the archaeologist scenario, where our ancestors were sitting around one day and one of them goes, "Dogs, what a good idea. Let's go swipe some wolf pups and start making dogs." In other words, humans took the initiative. They captured pups, they reared them, they kept the ones that were best adapted to living with humans, and they bred the friendliest and most tractable, and that was the start of dogs. And I credit Ray Coppinger with showing how that's unlikely, although I do think that people probably did try hand-raising wolf pups. It probably didn't work out a lot better back then than it does now.
Now, the Neolithic Revolution is when people all of a sudden switched from being hunters and gatherers in the Mesolithic to the Neolithic, when they started to actually raise crops. They're out there, they're raising wheat, and there's a whole huge number of animals that move in on the waste that they're creating in these environments. And one of the things you get is you get these canids. They're probably little canids. They're probably in the 25-pound range that are moving in, that are working the dumps and whatever else. And those are what become dogs.
Dogs are not really a domesticated wolf in the sense of, okay, we can just change a few variables and you have a dog. across the board, there are many subtle differences in terms of their early period of socialization, major differences. In terms of their reaction to people, there are some very marked differences.
In terms of their capacity for doing, at least on a fundamental level, a lot of the things that we do, and having the emotional, say, experiences that we do, and having complex social understanding, they are just as equipped as we are. They don't seem to have, certainly, a capacity for a type of language the way we do, and that affects all our behaviors, of course, so we don't know what that means about what the dog's experience is like by contrast. But they have very similar equipment. They're also social creatures, meaning their ancestry is a social species. And so that means there's a lot of overlap in terms of their behavior with the human animal, also quite social.
Because we've bred them to be this way. We domesticated them so that they would be members of our households. They relate so strongly and so completely that the humans that care for them really are the center of their world, whether it's looking for them or, wanting to get affection from them or be fed or any of the more basic things. But they are so attuned to their people.
So there's basically two approaches to behavior. One says that you have to put the dog in its place. You want to set the dog up to do the wrong thing and then put it in its place. And that dogs are misbehaving because they're trying to have a higher rank than you, and everything they do wrong is because they want a higher rank. And so you need to correct them so they know what's right. The other approach to training is that the reason they're doing something incorrectly is because they've been rewarded for that behavior. And in fact, this is science. Animals learn based on operant conditioning or trial and error learning. That is, they perform behaviors because they work. If a behavior works and they get what they want, they're going to do that behavior again. If the behavior doesn't work, they don't get what they want, they're going to try something else.
Lucy, here. Good girl.
Fred Skinner was a psychologist from Harvard, and he pretty well put together what we now call operant conditioning. And it itself is a description of how animals learn, how the animals interact with the environment and learn from the interaction with the environment.
The difference from a scientific point of view is a very important one. It is the difference between whether we are acting to escape from some aversive situation or the threat of one, or whether we are acting to produce what I would call a reinforcing or rewarding situation. And those are very important differences, because they are differences not only in why we behave, but in how we feel about our behavior. We feel free when we are doing the things we are reinforced for doing in a positive way. We feel unfree and coerced when we have to act to escape from a very strong punitive or coercive situation.
Keller and Marion Breland were two students of Fred Skinner, and they worked together with Skinner on developing behavioral systems based on the science he had developed earlier. And it's from Skinner that the Brelands got the idea of operant conditioning being such a powerful tool to change behavior.
That big empty space at the bottom of the picture is a good spot for a flower bed. Flowers come in many colors, so Hopper will have to do a lot of work.
I can only speculate as to why the Breland's attempts to introduce operant conditioning into dog training failed. But I think the speculation is pretty close, and that is it would require the contemporary trainers of the time to change their behavior. Animal trainers are used to changing the behavior of the animals, not of their own behavior, but of the animals.
Now, when you give a dog treats, you always use frozen fingers because you won't want the dog just grabbing it. So you freeze your fingers like this, and it's like a tray, and then you let them lick it out of your hand. When I got to be about 19, I decided I wanted a dog of my own rather than a family dog, so I got my golden retriever, a little puppy by the name of Tara, and I took her to dog training classes, and I liked what I saw, and so I practiced and practiced, and I said, well, maybe I'm good at this. And so then I started teaching, and back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they had what was called traditional dog training, so that when you brought a dog into dog classes, it was all leash corrections, pinning to the ground. In other words, you use punishment to get the dogs to do what you want them to do. And so that's how I learned.
The first bull terrier that I had in 1985, I didn't know any better. I took her to a trainer that my neighbor recommended, and he put a choke collar on her and started correcting her around his garage, walking in a very militaristic square pattern, and yank, yank, yank. And she was a 6-month-old puppy, and she got irritated, and she turned and she nipped at his foot. And he strung her up so that all 4 feet were off the ground in a process that's called helicoptering, and people unfortunately still do this. And he held her up there until she almost couldn't breathe, and then he swung her around behind his legs, stuck her nose between his knees, wrapped the leash around her nose, and beat her with the other end of the leash. My 6-month-old bull terrier puppy.
I'll tell you a story that might be interesting in terms of where I made that turning point when I had my little girl, Sierra. She was just a pup. She was like 6, 7 months old, and it was in the winter. We were out playing, and she was playing tug of war with me. And she nipped my hand with a glove, black glove on. And at the time, I learned to cuff the dog on the nose. Very nice, quick correction. Boom! She ran. That'd be 25, 35 feet away from me. This was my first, what the hell is this? What kind of dog is this? And she started sniffing the ground, and I'm like, Sierra, come here. Come here, girl. Looking all over. And, you know, again, I'm a punishment trainer for years. So I said, finally, I got down on my knees and everything, and finally she came over to me. And I was like, Sierra, it's okay. And it must have been 5 minutes. After we were cool, I thought everything was great. I took out the toy, the red rubber toy, and she ran.
One of the major influences for me when I switched from negative training to positive training was a book that came out back in the mid-1980s, I believe. And it was written by a woman by the name of Karen Pryor. It's called Don't Shoot the Dog. And she was able to take the scientific principles of training killer whales and dolphins and other animals and apply it to dog training. And this was a a real eye-opener for a lot of people because it was able to really precisely and concisely present the science behind the methods. And it's like manna to the world in dog training. So it was a great book.
My first husband entrepreneured an oceanarium in Hawaii with dolphins. This was back in the 60s. It was very new. I was the only person in the whole organization that had ever trained any animal to do anything. And we had a new scientific advisor who told us there was a new way to train dolphins. This was a new system that came out of B.F. Skinner's labs. How to build behavior in an organized fashion by reinforcing what you liked in small increments. And the dolphins were perfect animals to practice on because we were using food as the medium of exchange. And they were great big animals and they could eat a lot of fish before they got full. So you had plenty of room to make mistakes and give them fish for nothing before they stopped working. And so they were a great animal to learn on. And so that's where I got interested in training, not from dogs. Don't Shoot the Dog came out in 1985. It was not intended to be a book about dogs. It isn't. It's a book about teaching behavior to human beings, about changing the behavior of others, including yourself. What Don't Shoot the Dog provides is the guidelines to training the modern way, to shaping, to reinforcement, to developing cues rather than commands, to the technology for training without force and punishment. And before that, there was no way to really tell how to do it right. You could do it the traditional way or not at all. And nobody wrote it down. I don't know why not, but that's been the book that opened the gates. So when I go to an aquarium or a zoo, it's in every trainer's locker, an old beat-up water-stained copy of Don't Shoot the Dog. It was there for 20 years before it reached the dogs, but now it's in a lot of dog trainer shelves too.
I didn't start out thinking that I was going to do training or behavior. I was always fascinated by human behavior in general. I thought maybe I'd be a psychologist or something. I worked with my young dog, my setter, for a long time, and I was a punishment trainer. I used the old, I'd read all those books at the time that were popular, and I used a choke collar and, coercion. And so I started doing a little research and said, what else can I do? And I found mammal trainers. And they were making a real push to try and say, you can use this on killer whales, but you can also use it on dogs. And I started going, I never heard about this. What is this? And I started self-educating. I started finding more and more. And the more I read, the more confusing it got. On some side they said, dominate your dogs and tell them you're the boss. And then the scientists seem to be pushing in this different direction.
He's never jumped on anyone when he's come to the door.
Even as a friendly thing, never.
Never jumped on.
So what we really want to develop is a relationship where the dog is responding because he wants to get something from you.
Right.
You were having a hard time finding out what that was, so we just dumped the whole positive reinforcement as an approach because unfortunately you didn't have instructors to help you find that thing, and you just went to punishment. Your dog responds a little bit like a dog who has been punished. When he backed away and I asked you, has he done that before, and you said, why does he do that? That's a flinch. That tells me that your dog has a history of this. Not necessarily from you. Come here. Good.
Oh, you been down.
Yes. No, you did fine.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Boy.
Good.
Boy.
Good. Now he turned his head away.
Yes, you may.
He said, just give me the treat. Heck with the sniffing of it. That was very good. Hooray! In positive training, you don't correct the dog. You correct the dog's behavior. So if your dog's doing something that you don't want them to do, jumping on the table, bolting out the door, stealing food, chewing your bunny slippers, if your dog's doing anything like that, the first thought is, why did I let my dog do that? If you have a child that's running out in the house and running out into the street, you don't call a dog trainer and say, how do I get my kid to stop running out in the street? You use prevention and management first. You set up the environment so the dog or the child or your significant other can't do it. And then once you've set up a safety zone, once you set up the environment for safety, then you teach the dog the substitute behavior. So it isn't trying to stop a dog from doing all those things. It isn't trying to stop a dog from jumping and chewing and bolting out the door and biting people and lunging at people. It's what do you want your dog to do instead?
Here is Penny now. Penny looks around. He sees that everyone is very busy. And he wants to be very busy too. But what is Penny up to now? Penny, what are you doing? Why, he's trying to play with the broom. Oh, no, you don't, says Frank. Now, Penny, stop that. I have work to do. I'm very busy, Frank says. Penny. Here, go chase it.
People think that science-based training is reward, 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 and let the dog also do the bad behavior. No, that's completely wrong. You must make sure the dog does not get the opportunity to do the bad behavior. So for instance, if the dog is trying to pull, I'm going to make it clear to that dog, you're not going anywhere. And I'm not bossing you around, that's just the fact. If you want my attention, rubbing against me, pawing me, that's not going to work. And I'm going to make that clear that you are not getting attention for that. And once you do the correct behavior, then you're going to get a reward. And that's the difference. We try to make it black and white to the dog, what works and what doesn't work. And really the only way you can do that is by rewarding them exactly as the behavior occurs and removing rewards for the incorrect behavior before they get rewarded for that.
Okay, come. Halt. Good girl. Good girl.
Some people are hesitant to use food treats because they've had people use them incorrectly in the past. And if you use treats incorrectly, you end up with a dog who you're bribing. Oh, come, I have a treat. That's not training, that's bribery.
You want your treat? Woo! Oh yeah, this is gonna be good. Is this a good treat? Is this a good treat? Yeah, down the hatch.
If I have a dog who is sitting and I want to get him into a down position, it's the easiest thing in the world to get him to follow a food treat, right? And then reward him with it. He's happy, you're happy. No pain, no anything bad. But you don't want to keep using food treats. You want to fade them out. You want to enter real life rewards. I think that's what people don't understand about proper reward-based training. Whether you're using food or toys or whatever as a reward, something the dog likes. It's eventually, the dog doesn't get it every time. They start getting it maybe randomly, less and less, and then you get real life rewards. So you sit and you wait, the door opens, you get to go for a walk. You sit and your food bowl goes down. You lay down and I give you a tummy rub. Positive, to me, means that you are teaching a dog based on how the dog thinks, how the dog learns. You are teaching them in small steps that the dog can handle. I don't expect a dog to learn things, super fast or when I throw too much at them. If I'm teaching a dog and he's not getting it, it's my failure because I've asked too much of him at once or I'm not communicating to him in a way that he clearly understands what it is that I want.
Hi, how you doing? Good, good.
And I think if you're a good trainer, you don't have to actually resort to physical punishment. I think that says more about the trainer than anything else.
Get it. Lucy, here. Yeah. All right. Come here, Lucy. Let's go. Woohoo.
So I got into behavior because I wanted people to know that they don't have to use force in order to get their dog to do what they want. I wanted to spare the people the problems that I had with my dog. If people can understand why their dogs are really misbehaving they won't have to go through the same thing I did with my dog. And they can have a much better, more fulfilling relationship that's actually fun. Your relationship with your dog should be fun. It should not be like you at work having to boss a bunch of people around because they're not doing what you want. So I want everybody to experience the joy, the actual joy of having a dog.